There are a lot of updates for you in the case of David, the singer accused of murdering 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Her father speaks out about their purported relationship, more questions about this Santa Barbara trip, cell phone evidence, and was David caught on camera apologizing for the smell of a dead body? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so we have more on the latest in the criminal case against David. 21-year-old singer David Anthony Burke, who is currently charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains out in Los Angeles. This is all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who, as we know, was found dead, dismembered, decomposed, reportedly found in David's Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard back on September 8th of last year. He has entered a not guilty plea. Always important to remember that he is innocent until proven guilty, and I've been saying that for the past, week, 2 weeks, because the allegations against him are not only so serious, but also potentially so damning. I mean, the evidence, we've gone through at least 2 episodes where we've broken down what the purported evidence is from prosecutors against him. So what I want to get into today are some updates from the alleged Santa Barbara trip to cell phone evidence to a statement from Celeste's father. A lot more information I want to get into. And to just put it into context, and again, I'm not going to repeat it all here. I did previous sidebars on all this. You can check it out on Law and Crime's YouTube page, where I laid out all the potential evidence that prosecutors claim they have against David. But basically speaking, we are talking reportedly forensic, digital, testimonial, surveillance evidence. And essentially, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office claims that David was in an illegal sexual relationship with this 14-year-old girl, that it happened ever since she was 13, that she threatened to expose him, would destroy his career, invites her over to his place in LA, gets her a rideshare there, all the way from Lake Elsinore, allegedly quickly kills her once she arrives. Remember, multiple penetrating injuries. That's according to the forensic report, right, the ME's office. And then reportedly proceeds to sloppily dispose of her body by allegedly dismembering her and buying items online to help with the disposal. Prosecutors have referenced a shovel, chainsaws, body bag, laundry bags, a blue inflatable pool, that he allegedly made these purchases under a fake name, Victoria Mendez. Brutal crime. Brutal, brutal crime. All right. Now, when I say updates, I want to turn to a lot of these, and I'm not going to do it alone. I want to bring on somebody we haven't had in quite some time. Actually, I don't think we've had him on since David was arrested and charged and all of this potential evidence has been revealed. Retired Detective Matt Irvine joins us. Matt, good to see you. You and I had been breaking down this case for a while before David's arrest. So, but even before I go into the updates, I just am curious, 2 questions for you. A, what do you think of all the evidence, generally speaking, that investigators have been able to collect in this case so far, as laid out in the prosecution's brief? And B, this is an interesting part because I heard Harvey Levin from TMZ talk about it last week, that he says it's almost unusual at this point in the case that prosecutors are in fact laying out a lot of what they have, or almost everything that they have, in this preliminary hearing brief. So 2 parts. A, what do you think of the investigative work, the potential evidence? And B, is it unusual at this point in the case that authorities are revealing what they have?
First of all, Jesse, thank you for having me back on to discuss these really important and tragic updates in this case. First of all, to your first question, I think the investigation that's been laid out so far has been thorough. It's been outstanding. The breadth and depth of investigation and evidence that's been hinted at so far by the LA District Attorney's Office is truly impressive. And I really have to hand it to LAPD and the DA's office for being willing to stand in silence and take the blows that they've been taking over these last 6 or 7 months, with all the folks saying, what are they doing or why aren't they doing anything? And it was very clear that they weren't able to talk about what they were doing, but they've clearly been doing a lot, and probably from the moment that Celeste's body was discovered in the Tesla. As to your second question, it is unusual to have this much evidence laid out by the prosecution this early in the case. A preliminary hearing is really just that. It's a bare bones showing of the evidence by the prosecution, simply to convince a judge that there is probable cause, which is a fairly low standard, to proceed with the prosecution. So they are definitely front loading their evidence in this case.
And the preliminary hearing is scheduled now for the end of the month. It was supposed to be last week. And to me, my cynical version of this is there's been a lot of criticism, a lot of commentary, and a lot of spotlight put on authorities in this case about how thorough the investigation is, how accurate the investigation is there a disagreement between the Los Angeles PD and the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. So to see this potential breadth of evidence, how much they have, in my opinion, I wonder if it's a sign to the public, let us do our jobs, look what we have, look at the case that we're building. All right, real quick, before we go any further, for all you cat owners out there, who doesn't want their cat to be healthy and happy, right? That's the most important thing. Feeding them smalls, that's the key. Why do I say that? Look, most cat food out there is made with cheap fillers and meat byproducts and artificial ingredients. At the end of the day, your cat's health is going to pay the price. That's the truth. Smalls is different. Why? Their recipes are made with preservative-free, 100% human-grade ingredients that you would find right in your fridge. Cats rely on protein for energy. They also need a lot of hydration to stay healthy and toned. And Smalls contains at least 88% animal protein. And their fresh ingredients, they are gently cooked to retain all of their nutrients, all of the hydration, all of the flavor. 88% of cat parents report that after feeding them Smalls, their cats have better digestion and shinier coats and more energy to play. The experts have also been raving about it. Forbes ranked Smalls the best overall cat food. BuzzFeed reviewers reported that their cats went ballistic for this stuff. Your cat's health, it starts with what they eat. So, try Smalls, get 60% off your first order, plus free shipping and treats for life when you go to smalls.com/sidebar. Now, I want to get into the updates. And the first thing I have to talk about is this Santa Barbara trip. We've talked about this before on previous sidebars, really was illuminated a lot in the prosecution's brief that was filed in anticipation of this preliminary hearing. I'm going to talk about why I'm mentioning this again. There's an update to it. So just going from the brief to provide some context, it says, despite knowing she was dead and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show defendant lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, defendant drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after the victim died, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy evidence. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2025, he drove away from his home as he texted and called the victim's phone asking where she was. Again, these were acts calculated and planned to set up his defense within a very short timeline after the victim's vicious murder. Defendant drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, SR 154, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. He returned home early the following morning on April 24, 2025, before going to a radio interview for the release of his album that week. He sent 2 additional texts to the victim's phone that day, which obviously went unanswered because she was already dead. After April 26, 2025, defendant never attempted to contact her again. I've said this before, that if that's true, if the prosecution can establish that, that's bad, because if he's going to claim he had nothing to do with it, and he had this whatever connection to her whatsoever, even at the very least a friendship, prosecutors are saying it was an illegal sexual relationship, never tries to contact her again after she goes missing. So again, that's an important allegation. Then it says, on May 8, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home at around 11:30 p.m. He returned to the area again on May 31st, 2025. This is an isolated site off SR 154 where the victim's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Additionally, on July 7th, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the same fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. Defendant's cellular activity and communications derived from defendant's iPhone and Tesla, which demonstrate defendant's activities from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025, including a trip to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after the victim arrived at his Hollywood Hills home. Why am I talking about that? What's the update? Steve Fisher. We've had him on the program multiple times. I've had him on Jesse Weber Live on News Nation. He's the private investigator who was hired by the owner of the property where David was staying, that was allegedly near where the Tesla was found. He was tasked with looking into this. He's currently on another search right now, by the way. But he took to X, and he also added some new aerial photos. And he said in his post, quote, on Friday, May 1st, I spent the day in Santa Barbara County off SR 154 in the area where Celeste's passport card was found by a Caltrans worker. I captured high-resolution drone imagery of the area. Once I finish my current search mission in the Grand Canyon, I will process the imagery through the detection analysis programs we use. The area is covered by license plate readers. The specific area where he appears to have pulled off SR-154 has a gate that is closed from sunset to sunrise, so his car would likely have had to stay relatively close to SR-154. There are trails that lead down to the water, so someone could dispose of a chainsaw or other evidence there. Given how small and weak David is, I do not believe a chainsaw or other heavy evidence would be far into the water. The water is clear, and I was able to see several feet into it with the drone. I have a couple thousand high-resolution images from the area to process. I have attached a few low-resolution preview images to give an idea of the terrain. Hashtag Celeste Rivas Hernandez, hashtag David. Before I go any further, Matt, you tell me what you take away from that.
Well, the first thing you talked about, his activities in the immediate aftermath of Celeste's killing, I think are really telling, because I think they defeat any argument that this was an accident, an overdose, or even some crime of passion. It really speaks to what the prosecution is alleging in their special circumstance allegation of lying in wait, which is that he lured her to his home with the intention to kill her. And the reason I say that is an accident, a crime of passion, it would be hard to imagine that somebody would have the presence of mind in the minutes afterwards to essentially stage an alibi for themselves by sending multiple texts to a person that they just killed. And then to then immediately, within minutes or hours of her death, drive all the way to Santa Barbara County to dispose of some kind of evidence. Again, speaks to this being a premeditated crime and not an accident or a crime of passion. He was just too busy, too calculating, too quickly after her death for this to be anything other than a premeditated homicide. As to the multiple trips, and I think that also ties in with the multiple online orders that we're seeing evidence of. It seems like in the days and weeks following her killing, he engaged in a lot of activity to try to cover up what he did and to dispose of Celeste in a way that would make it harder for this child's remains to be found or identified.
I'm glad you made that point. I talked about this on a previous sidebar. And by the way, Harvey Levin talked about it too in his own analysis that, like, look, there's no witness testimony as far as we can tell. There's no surveillance footage of the actual alleged killing. So what happened behind closed doors? And could that be room for reasonable doubt? I've seen cases before where somebody is acquitted of a murder, but actually convicted of the disposal of the body. So it's two separate things. But the fact that the timing of this is key, either, let's say, there was some sort of altercation, something happened in the house, whatever it is, that it wasn't a premeditated murder, she dies, and then either he just thinks so quickly about how to do all this, or it's, like you said, the evidence may suggest this was planned. There was thinking going into this. Although it is interesting, Matt, to think about why not purchase everything beforehand? The bags, the inflatable pool, the chainsaw. Why did that all come afterwards?
Well, again, there's a lot that we don't know yet, but I think the timing is critical in terms of, and correct me if my dates are a little bit off, but as I recall, the text exchanges in which she essentially threatened to expose him came within something like
that's true
48 hours of her last visit to his home and her killing. So I think it's quite possible that the decision to kill her came in response to those threats to expose him, those threats to his career. And that's, again, why the LADA's office has put the special circumstance allegation that this was done to kill a witness and for financial gain. The financial gain in this case being his career. And frankly, have not seen these allegations used in this way. Usually murder for financial gain, we think about, murder for hire or a hitman, killing of a witness. We think about it in terms of organized crime and gang cases where a person is already named as a witness in a case that's already ongoing. In this case, the specifics are a little bit different, but the theory, I think, holds.
And lying in wait, right? So these special circumstances allegations basically get you a higher penalty if he's convicted of murder. You're talking life in prison without the possibility of parole, possibly the death penalty, although there is a moratorium on executions in California. Going back to how they might be able to track him to Santa Barbara, there is another post, and I talked about this a little bit, but there's another post by Steve. And this one is actually accompanied by video of him driving. And it says, one may wonder how David could be so dumb to leave his cell phone on all 3 times he came out to SR 154 in Santa Barbara, the same road Celeste's passport was found. Maybe he didn't bring the phone, but didn't think about the license plate reader. This goes to a question: how can they track him, Matt? And how accurate is that data? Is this something that can be questioned by defense attorneys successfully at trial? Or in your experience, if you're talking about cell phone records, license plate readers, that becomes very, very difficult for defense attorneys to argue about the reliability, the accuracy of that data?
It's pretty hard to argue with geolocation data, especially if you've got multiple sources of data. It's quite likely, because this is not a sophisticated offender, that he didn't think about leaving his phone behind. And if he brought his phone with him, that can be tracked very precisely. Even when the phone is off, there is usually some limited geolocation data available with most smartphones. That's how your Find My Phone app works, even if your phone's turned off or the battery's died. As to the traffic cameras, that's a very good source of evidence. It would be interesting to see who manages those traffic cameras. Flock, which is the big company, typically only keeps that data for about 30 days, but they contract with different localities and law enforcement agencies, and so that can be extended. It would be unusual to me if that data was available 6 or so months later, which would be the earliest that an investigation could have started, because they didn't find poor Celeste until September. Traffic cameras are a possibility. I think more likely we're talking about geolocation data through the phone, and quite possibly through the Tesla as well.
Next up, timeline. So from when prosecutors claim she was killed on April 23rd to his arrest to the charging, it's about a year, right? So Steve posts this. This is, again, an update. Can't stop thinking about the timeline of the murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez as put forward in the pretrial brief. Could the 10:30 p.m. "Where are you?" text messages actually be real and not a staged alibi? Could Celeste have walked away after an argument upon arriving in the Uber? Maybe those texts from David asking where she was were real, and after he didn't receive a response, he went looking for her, found her, and they ended up driving to Santa Barbara County where the killing actually occurred. He could have shut her phone off when finding her. In that scenario, her body could have remained along SR 154 for the roughly 12 days until the pool, body bag, laundry bags, and chainsaws were ordered and delivered May 1st and May 5th. It is also worth noting that the pool was ordered after her death, meaning it would not have contained blood from the actual killing. The DA's version of events is a very compressed timeline: arrival at 10:10 p.m., a fatal stabbing, and then being composed enough to send an alibi text by 10:30 p.m. That is a 20-minute window. They also claim the trip to Santa Barbara that evening was to start disposing of evidence. However, the evidence had not even been purchased yet. The pool, chainsaw, shovel, and other items had not even been ordered at the time of the first Santa Barbara trip. There's also the question of storing a body at his manager Josh Marshall's rental house for 12 days while waiting for tools, with nearby neighbors and decomposition odors likely becoming noticeable within a few days, all while David was out of town and having to trust that nobody would enter a house that wasn't even leased to him. None of this changes the central point that David is responsible. He killed Celeste. That I am certain of. Like I said, the DA is likely correct in their theory. They're working with all the evidence. Hashtag David, hashtag Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Again, that is Steve's perspective, Steve's opinion on it. But he does raise interesting questions there, right?
Yeah, and again, it's certainly possible. I did read that, and I think Steve's theory or alternate theory, has some merit. His statement about the compressed timeline, I think, is less salient if you decide that David had made up his mind to kill Celeste at the time that he lured her to his home. I think if he'd already made up his mind in the days or hours prior to inviting her over, the fact that he staged the phone calls and made the trip to Santa Barbara so quickly thereafter makes more sense. Steve's right that a lot of the evidence in this case had not yet come into David's possession, but there would have been Celeste's passport card, it could have involved her phone, and it could have been a trip to dispose of the murder weapon. So all of those items would be things that David might want to get rid of as soon as possible. As to the idea that she was killed out in Santa Barbara, that's certainly possible. I would be wondering about evidence of a struggle or blood inside the Tesla. That would require David then, after killing her in Santa Barbara, to put her body in his car and drive it 100 or so miles back to Los Angeles, which would be a very risky thing for him to do, whether he did it immediately afterwards or 2 weeks later. So possible. Yes, but as Steve said, the LADA and the LAPD are the ones who are working with all the evidence, and they seem to believe that the evidence shows she was lured to his home to be murdered there.
And risky, I mean, it's also risky allegedly murdering somebody in this house that he was leasing, right? So it does become a question too. Here's another update that I want to talk about, another aspect. So prior investigation and her movements. So this court paperwork, this brief, reveals that investigators had apparently been looking into David for quite some time. Not about Celeste killing, but about this apparent relationship. Remember, he is charged with having an illegal sexual relationship. So the filing says detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family who live in Lake Elsinore in February and April 2024. RSSD telephonically contacted defendant on February 17, 2024, and after they identified a phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. During the call, defendant claimed he had spoken to the victim last on February 13th or 14th, 2024, but stated he was unaware she was a minor or that she had been reported missing. RCSD advised him that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies would be coming to his home. On that day, defendant was living at 804 North Doheny Place in West Hollywood. RCSD requested that LASD conduct a welfare check at defendant's home. LASD deputies went to defendant's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. Defendant again claimed he was unaware she was a minor and he had only met the victim once in person in November 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time, she returned home 2 days later. Despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. Defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. I say all that. Here are the updates. Steve, back to Steve, posts this. Minors such as Celeste Rivas Hernandez cannot just travel to London without consent. Here are the laws in the UK about minors traveling with an adult that is not their parent. U.S. citizens do need an ETA visa to travel to or through the UK. You'll need to show that your parent or guardian consents to your travel and accommodation arrangements. If you do have to apply for a standard visitor visa, you'll need to identify the adult traveling with you in your visa application. If the person you're traveling with is not your parent, you'll need to provide specific information about them in your application. You can identify up to 2 adults in your visa application. Their names will appear on your visa. The adult can apply for a visa at the same time, but you must each complete separate applications. Matt, over to you. I don't know the specifics of this. I don't know if you know differently, but he does raise questions about how she would be able to travel with David and who knew what.
And there's a lot that we still don't know and that may still be unknown to the investigation as well. The kind of subtext of this that concerns me, and I saw other comments about whether or not David provided money to Celeste's family. For a child sex predator to ingratiate himself with the families of their victims, it's not unusual. It's part of the MO. And that doesn't put blame on the families. The only person to blame for what happened to Celeste, both her sexual abuse and her murder, is David Burke, at least as far as the evidence shows at this point. So what the family knew, what the family did, tried to do, was unable to do to stop this relationship with David, there's a lot that we don't know there.
Well, can I just jump in because this is part of the other update? Celeste's father spoke out. We know the family has been relatively silent during this whole process, understandably so. But this was reported by TMZ that Celeste's father, Jesus Rivas, through the family attorney, Patrick Steinfeld, said, quote, "I never had any contact with this guy and we haven't received any money from him or anyone in his family." Now, on my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, I spoke to Lauren Conlin, a columnist for Los Angeles Magazine. She's been looking into this case. She said these rumors about the money came from posts on Reddit that originated from Celeste's hometown of Lake Elsinore. And she added on my show, this family is going through something so horrific and so tragic that no family should have to go through. We're living in this crazy society where we blame the victim's family. And at this point, we just don't know enough. Matt, back to you. People will still look at this and say, how is it possible that the family never met him or didn't know him or he didn't know him? Back to you.
Again, it would be absolutely normal and natural for a predator to ingratiate himself with the family of his victim. We don't know how or to what degree this happened in this case, but that puts blame on the predator and not on the family. David was a very powerful, glamorous, wealthy, successful artist. This is a family that by all accounts was struggling to get by in a kind of remote, distant, dusty corner of Southern California. The power dynamic there is overwhelming. The power over a child as young as 11 when this relationship started, and the power over a family of limited means trying to compete with this glamorous, successful, wealthy guy. Clearly, they took the phone away from her because there was something they objected to, something they were trying to keep from happening. He traveled 70 miles and gave $1,000 to a middle school kid to get her another phone. Whatever they tried to forbid, whether it was, judging, grounding, whatever they tried to do, the evidence is that Celeste responded by running away. And again, that's not casting any blame on Celeste either. She was a child, and her parents are victims in this too. And they've suffered a unspeakable loss at the hands, apparently, of somebody truly ghoulish. And we need to be careful as we talk about this that we don't start becoming ghouls ourselves. She is a victim, her parents are victims, and the only person to blame that we know of so far for the death of this child is David Burke.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. And just something else I'll add to this, a couple things. One, it's impossible to know what this family is going through. I mean, it's one thing to have to go through this whole year of uncertainty, and then to find out the details of what happened to Celeste is unthinkable. Number two, and this goes to the defense, if there was evidence that David was paying the family to keep them quiet about the relationship or anything like that, if they're trying to prove this sexual relationship, if they're trying to prove that he wanted to keep it quiet, I have to imagine that would have made its way into the evidence so far. I have to imagine that would have made its way into the brief. We haven't seen that. So I think that that should be an important consideration for anyone out there who is casting some sort of blame or some sort of spotlight on the family. Just keep that in mind as we go into
Thank you for saying that. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think, the father coming out and saying that at this point in time, understandable, has to address it. Okay, before I let you go, this is a big one. So the filing states, and there's been a lot of talk about whether or not David had help. Is anybody else responsible? How could he do this on his own if the allegations are true? And he's innocent until proven guilty. The filing states that David lied to friends, business associates, and others about the strong smell of decay in and around the home and the car. TMZ published this video, reportedly from a July 4th, 2025 live stream, so a few months after the alleged murder. Oh, and by the way, according to the prosecution's brief, it was only a few weeks later, July 29th, quote, surveillance video and other evidence confirmed defendant was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29, 2025, before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour. So that's a very important date. That in this clip, David appears to be with Neil Langston. We've talked about him before, reportedly arrested in Montana to appear in a court hearing connected to the case, possibly grand jury, although he's not been charged directly in connection with Celeste's death. And Sukana, so apparently he's friends. And in the video, in the house, he apologizes for the, quote, the way his bathroom smells. And he claims it was because he went to the bathroom a couple hours earlier. Now, that is a significant video in my mind. I don't know. Is that going to be a potential piece of evidence? Is it connected to these allegations? You tell me, Matt.
I'm not sure whether anybody assisted David in any part of the murder or the cover-up of that murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. I think it's almost unimaginable that there weren't people that were aware that he was having a sexual relationship with this child in the year and a half leading up to her murder. She looked like a child. He traveled extensively with her. It's hard to imagine that people didn't know that that was going on. As to the killing itself or its cover-up, I think that has yet to be seen. I don't know what the evidence will show. I'm sure that LAPD did extensive interviews of his circle of friends and associates in the investigation of this case. And I think it's quite likely that when this case moves forward, we will learn of those statements. And there may be persons who cooperated with law enforcement in order to avoid criminal liability themselves.
I just think him on tape talking about a smell at that given time frame in that area, I mean, it could be because of the bathroom or it could be because it's, based on the prosecutor's allegations about Celeste. I don't know, just chilling video to say the least. Matt Irvine, thank you so much for taking the time to break down these updates with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody. You know how we've been following this strange disappearance of a retired Air Force general with these apparent connections to military technology and the UFO program? Well, right now we have some updates. We have a new timeline. Apparently there is a new photo of him, and his wife is speaking out. We're trying to get to the bottom of the theories, the investigation, and what may be going on here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick before we jump further into this, I gotta tell you about this app called Upside. It's unbelievable. I think it's a game changer, actually. Why? Because Upside gets you cash back. Yes, extra cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, takeout. So here's what you do. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer of one of their 100,000 plus locations, and you pay like normal with your card. You verify the purchase, and just like that, money back. So say I need to get gas or I want takeout one night, I'm going to search for Upside offers first. And after I spend, money appears in my app that I can then transfer right into my bank account. And plus, Upside's frequent users, they earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. So a retired Air Force general vanishes from his home in the middle of the day. There's no phone, there's no glasses, no sign of a struggle, just gone. Now again, we've covered a lot of strange stories on Sidebar, of course. This one feels different. We were following it from the very beginning, back when it was just a silver alert and a worried family. And a silver alert, usually issued for older adults, more vulnerable adults. Sometimes there's health issues involved, but this is weird. And this is all before the internet started, spinning theories. But here's where the story takes a turn. This missing man is William Neal McCaslin. And this is a new photo that authorities have just released showing what they believe McCaslin was wearing right before he disappeared. And I want you to get a good look at this picture here, okay? Because McCaslin didn't just serve in the Air Force. He once commanded the exact laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same base where conspiracy theorists have long claimed is where the government secretly stored wreckage from Roswell, the Roswell incident. But it gets stranger, because McCaslin's name shows up in hacked emails between Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager, John Podesta, and Blink-182 guitarist Tom DeLonge, discussing UFO disclosure. And then just days before McCaslin disappeared, President Donald Trump announced plans to release government UFO files. Coincidence? Maybe. But also, how do I not talk about that? Is something far stranger happening out in the New Mexico desert? Was he taken by a bad actor who wanted the information that he had? Or is this a tragic circumstance? Is this a personal circumstance? We have been tracking this case since day one, and now with all of these theories piling up and still no sign of McCaslin, we're going to try to break down everything that people are saying online, right? From kidnapping to a possible national security issue to, yes, the mothership, that comes up too. So we're going to get a guest on who's going to help kind of separate what's real, what's speculation, what investigators might actually be looking at right now, because trust me, you're not going to believe where this story goes. And we actually have some new information that was just released from the Bernalillo County Sheriff, giving us a bit more information on McCaslin's whereabouts prior to his disappearance. I mentioned a timeline. So I want to take you back to where all this started with what we are now learning about this timeline. So we have Friday, February 27th. It's a quiet morning in the foothills of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Sandia Mountains are right there, beautiful, rugged, the kind of place people move to for the views, the access to the outdoors. Now, according to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, which is the lead agency on this case, here's how the timeline breaks down, okay? Around 10 a.m., a repairman arrives at a home on Quail Run Court for a scheduled job. And while he's there, he interacts with the homeowner, a 68-year-old retired Air Force general named William Neal McCaslin. That interaction is confirmed, and it is apparently the last confirmed sighting of him. About an hour later, at around 11:10 a.m., McCaslin's wife leaves the house for a medical appointment. And when she returns just before 12:04 p.m., the house is empty. Now, according to friends who spoke with the Dayton Daily News, McCaslin is the kind of guy who loves the outdoors, an avid hiker, a skier, biker, someone comfortable navigating the rough terrain. So at first glance, you might be thinking, okay, maybe he just stepped out for a walk or an activity. But this is where it gets strange, because according to the sheriff's office, McCaslin left behind his phone, which was still sitting on the counter, his prescription glasses, his wearable devices, including his Apple Watch, all still inside the home. So for someone to walk out the door in 2026 without those things, it's a little weird, right? And by around 3 p.m. that afternoon, his wife reports him missing. And investigators, they quickly issue what is known as a silver alert. Early information suggested that McCaslin might have had some kind of medical issue, which led many people to assume, his age, does he have dementia or Alzheimer's, some sort of mental health condition. But we're going to come back to that because his wife would later address that directly and make it very clear that was not the case. But you do have a missing person. You have a retired Air Force Major General. And according to his official U.S. Air Force biography, this is a guy who spent 34 years working on some of the most sensitive technology the U.S. military has: astronautical engineering, space acquisition, the National Reconnaissance Office, the spy satellite people, the Pentagon, eventually command of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Again, that's the lab that, according to his bio, managed a $2.2 billion science and technology program, plus another $2.2 billion in customer-funded research and development. And here's why that matters for the UFO connection, because according to an article that was published by Ohio State University, Wright-Patterson was the headquarters of Project Blue Book, the government's 17-year investigation into UFOs that looked at nearly 13,000 reported sightings. That's been the report. And for decades, conspiracy theorists have claimed that that is where the government took the debris from the Roswell incident in 1947. So those claims, I will be clear, have never officially been confirmed, but the association's there. So day one comes and goes. There's no signs of him. Day two, day three, nothing. And then the searches begin. According to the sheriff's office, they started canvassing the neighborhood. We're talking more than 700 homes, going door to door, asking for ring camera footage, security video, anything that might have caught a glimpse of McCaslin leaving the area. Drone operations, helicopter support, ground searches with search and rescue teams, canine units, horses, volunteers. They're scouring the foothills, the trails, the open space around his home. And then on March 7th, more than a week into the search, investigators find something. The sheriff's office reported they located a gray U.S. Air Force sweatshirt about 1.25 miles east of McCaslin's residence. They collected it, they processed it, and according to their statement, no blood was detected during initial analysis, and additional testing is pending. They also noted that the family has not been able to confirm the sweatshirt actually belonged to McCaslin, but it was enough to send search teams back out to that area. And by the 2-week mark, the sheriff's office releases this new photo showing McCaslin wearing a button-up shirt. This is very, very crucial, by the way, because this is the shirt that investigators now say they believe he was wearing when he disappeared. So I want you to get a good look at this picture here, okay? They also confirm some other items are unaccounted for, like his hiking boots, his wallet, a .38 caliber revolver with a leather holster. And meanwhile, the FBI is also now involved. According to BCSO, the Albuquerque field office started assisting. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations is also looped in. New Mexico State Search and Rescue, Albuquerque Mountain Rescue. It's a multi-agency effort now. And still, according to the sheriff's latest update, there's no confirmed sightings, no video of him leaving, no direction of travel, nothing as far as we can see, at least as far as they're coming out with information. And that is when the internet started doing what the internet does. Because when a retired Air Force general with ties to Wright-Patterson disappears under mysterious circumstances and his name happens to appear in hacked emails discussing UFO disclosure, that's when people start to talk, right? And trust me, they have. From kidnapping to national security theories to, yes, alien abduction. So what exactly are people claiming happened here? And what does McCaslin's wife have to say about all of this? That is what we're going to get into next, because while the internet has been running wild with speculation, his wife finally broke her silence. And what she said is, well, let's just say she addressed the elephant in the room head on, and she brought up the thing that everybody's been asking about, the aliens. Before we even get to that, and before we even get into the theories, we wanted to bring in somebody who can help us understand what might actually be happening behind the scenes, because it's very easy to get lost in the UFO chatter, right? But at the end of the day, there are real investigations working this case. You have a missing persons case. How different is this one compared to other ones? This is why I now want to bring in private criminal defense investigator Billy Lane. Such a pleasure to always have him. Billy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this. Do you find it strange that he hasn't been found?
No. A lot of it depends on the area in which he went missing from. We've had searches that go on for months. Typically within 30 days is a normal good time frame to try and locate somebody and bring them back home. So as you had mentioned, there's a lot of chatter going on with this search, with the disappearance of him. And I think sometimes that brings in good and bad because it can bring in additional resources like the federal government, like the military. But the bad part is that sometimes you lose focus on the fact that this is a missing man. Just like in a lot of other cases, he's a dad, he's a brother, a husband, a friend who possibly chose to leave his home on his own accord and is either in a location where he's had a medical emergency, he's had an accident, or unfortunately he's chosen to cause potential self-harm to himself.
But again, if you have all of these agencies looking for him and all of this attention, even if you had a situation like that, how could he not be found? I mean, does it suggest more likely that he was taken?
I'm not quite sure if I buy into that theory because he's armed. Number one, he has a gun on him. From what we're hearing, there's no.
Well, I mean, maybe we can't account for the gun, but maybe.
Correct. He's been trained. He knows what he's doing. I feel like he would fall higher in the possibilities of self-defense than your average person based on his history in the military. Okay. I believe if that was the case and he was taken, you're going to see some struggle. You're going to see some indications that he did not want to go with this person. What's very concerning in this case is that he left his glasses, he left his phone, he left his watch. And when it all boils down, we see this a lot in our cases. We try not to focus on the noise. We try to focus on the individual and that he, like a lot of other people, leave their devices and walk away from them. Why do they do that? Well, they don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be followed. They don't have any intent to communicate with anybody unless they return. So that's concerning. And we see that a lot of times in these cases where people want to go into the woods and, and do their own thing.
Two parts about this. The photo that was released. A, how significant is that? And B, why release a photo like this now as we're so far into this investigation?
I think they want to jog people's memory. I think they want people to sort of look at the picture and see if they remember seeing him in those clothes or in that state. There's several pictures of him being released out here. Some of them are older pictures. So you want the most recent picture to try and jog somebody's memory and see if they did see him. I think it's very significant that, that they are looking for Ring doorbell camera video, because what you're trying to do, you're trying to get a direction of travel. Which way was he heading? Where was he heading to? Where's the last point in which we knew he was at? That's very important to us. Like I tell everybody, and I think we've said this before, it's not about the who and the why and the possibilities. It's about the where. Right. Where that last spot that he was at is the most important thing.
The sweatshirt that was found, a little over a mile east of his home, discovered on March 7th, no blood in the initial processing. Family can't confirm if it's his. A, how do you handle a piece of evidence like that? And how significant do you think it is here?
You collect it like it's a piece of evidence in a criminal investigation. You preserve it and try to get it in to be processed. The most important thing is hit his DNA on that shirt, if they've done that. And also you need to, it's not the end all be all because you don't know if it's his or not. So you have to document where it's at and you have to consider that as part of your search. For us, the most important thing is confirmed last known location. Now the shirt could potentially confirm that he was there at some point, but that hasn't happened yet. So you have to consider the possibility that it could be involved. So you need to search that area. But the most important place is the home and how, and not for nothing, but he's a very athletic individual based on reports. He hikes, he does a lot of things outdoors. So what is his potential to be able to get to a certain location? How far could he have went? Normally for us, it's about 2 miles. For this gentleman here, it could be 10 miles. What did he take with him? Did he take any supplies with him that he could have lasted longer, more days? Maybe he wants to get away. Maybe he wants to get farther into the mountains. There's a lot of possibilities, but each one of those helps us determine, how far our search parameters are going to be. Typically, they're within 2 miles for your average person.
So authorities, I thought this was interesting. They've expanded to the neighborhood. They're canvassing more than 700 homes. They're asking for security footage from this specific window, right? February 27th to the 28th, between 9 a.m., 2 p.m. As far as we can see, they also say they don't have confirmed video of him leaving that area, no direction of travel, nothing, as far as they're telling us, unless maybe they're not revealing some information to the public. But this is 2026, you have cameras. How is it possible they can't capture him?
Path of travel, you'd have to look at where the home is. We have a lot of people who go out the back doors. They know where some of the cameras are. If they really want to circumvent the cameras, they can. And the other possibility is that, he got in a car with someone, or he somehow got out of the neighborhood, wasn't captured on the cameras.
Do you think about that too when you look at the short time frame between when the wife left and when she came back home?
Yeah, but also if I wanted to go do something and it wasn't the best choice in the world, maybe I want to do that when my wife leaves. Maybe that's the prime opportunity time for me to walk out the door and not be stopped by my wife or by somebody who loves me, because maybe I'm having a crisis at the moment. Maybe I do want to do something that's not the best choice.
Let me ask you about some of the theories, and I'm going to start with it because it's important to address it. I can't not address it when we're talking about this man with this career and the timing of it. So the idea, one of the theories is, this is a guy who knew things, deeply classified things. Whether you want to say it's outdated information or not, you could still make the argument valuable information, national security information that he was taken. So when you think about that, we talked earlier about his Air Force bio, 34 years, the National Reconnaissance Office, command of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson. I talked about the billions of dollars that was assigned to here that he was overseeing, right? He has all of this classification. He has this know-how. When you think about a potential foreign actor or a foreign party or a bad actor who might want that information, does that seem plausible to you? I mean, you mentioned before why you don't think it's likely he was taken, but if we're trying to navigate the possibility that he had information that was valuable, is that something that's being considered, and how is it being investigated and considered?
I would say absolutely it has to be considered. You have to run that to ground. You have to prove that that's not the case here. And that's where you're seeing the FBI potentially coming in, law enforcement are taking that into consideration. But the question you have to ask yourself is, why now? He's been retired for some time. Why did they take the opportunity at this moment in time to come get him? Why didn't this happen before? Maybe when he had more access to more information than he does now. So that's a major consideration. And as a police detective and federal agent, you have to run that to ground to figure out whether or not this is a possibility. Is it a bad actor? Are there other things in play? And are you really going to release that information if that truly is the case? You're going to keep that close to your chest.
Let me ask you about what the wife said. So his wife addressed this directly in her post on Facebook, as well as other things. She said, and I'm quoting here, "He retired from the AF almost 13 years ago and has had only very commonly held clearances since. It seems quite unlikely that he was taken to extract very dated secrets from him." What do you make of that? I mean, first of all, that she's responding online, and B, that there is no value to what information he might have.
I think she's trying to shut down the noise. I think that's exactly what she's trying to do. She wants people, the community, she wants law enforcement to focus on the fact that he's a man who walked away from his home and is out there somewhere and he needs our help. And that's exactly what I would be doing too if I was his loved one and I had that information. Because if not, you're going to have law enforcement, you're going to have all the search teams in these rabbit holes thinking that, well, somebody's taking him somewhere when maybe he's actually right out there in those mountains, right out there in that area where he knows he's been to before. Maybe he finds peace and tranquility there. So at this point, I think it would need to be all hands on deck and a lot of feet on the ground, if you will.
So let me ask you about now the UFO angle. I have to ask you about this, okay? And specifically the timing of this. Let me lay it out for everybody. On February 19th, President Trump posted on Truth Social. He says he's directing the Secretary of War and other agencies to begin identifying and releasing government files related to UFOs and UAPs and extraterrestrial life. February 26th, the day before McCaslin vanishes, Hillary Clinton sits for a deposition in the House Epstein investigation. And during that deposition, she is asked about UFO disclosure, about John Podesta's interest in it. And she responds, and let me play that clip again.
When your husband was president, it was Lawrence Rockefeller had an effort to try to disclose UFOs, UAPs. When you were running for president, John Podesta publicly stated that you would disclose these files if given the chance, if you had been president. Are you pleased to see that these files may be disclosed finally?
I am, please.
Now, that's the deposition date, February 26th. Next day, February 27th, McCaslin is reported missing. So just to be clear here, we are looking at the timeline. Investigators are not saying these events are connected. We're just simply examining them for their relevance as pertains to a potential timeline. Billy, is any of that relevant?
Absolutely. That falls into the why, potentially. This might have triggered a anxiety situation for him that he may have to go testify. He may be questioned about his activities after he's retired. So this could have been an anxiety situation that triggered some type of scenario where he felt like he needed to leave. He needed to get out of the spotlight and potentially could have made bad choices to cause harm to himself over this scenario. As you can imagine, he's lived his entire life doing this. He's had these clearances. He's done things that others only theorize about. So now I find it very concerning that this happened so close to the release of this information. Absolutely.
By the way, his wife addressed this Podesta connection indirectly in her post. She said, after the Russians hacked John Podesta's emails, see Neil's Wikipedia page, there was less contact with the community pushing for release of UFO information. And she mentions the Russian hack of the emails. We're going to get to that in a minute. But she doesn't directly address the timing of the disappearance relative to the Clinton deposition or Trump's announcement. But she makes note of this in a certain way. What did you make of it?
There again, I think she's just trying to explain away some of the scenarios. And like I said, I think there's a lot of noise. Anybody can have access and get a hold of your emails like, we've seen before. We've seen this happen. We've had this conversation about leaks in the government and leaks of information. And I think she's just trying to shut down the fact that he's not part of this. This wasn't his life, that he might have not been actively involved like the pictures being painted. And there again, he may be just a normal man who used to do an extraordinary job, and now he is missing, and we need to focus on the fact that he walked out of his home like any other person might have. A lot of noise creates a waste of resources sometimes. And sometimes you need to bring those resources back in and focus on the basic facts of what's going on.
It is so weird, though. Like, the timing is so weird and circumspect. I get it. I totally get it. And I would say the one, when we think about this, that ties everything together, this UFO connection, I just want to amplify it a little bit. And I want to be careful here, again, because there is a lot of material, and his wife actually addressed most of it directly in her post. But I want to start with what we seem to know. This is according to the WikiLeaks emails from 2016. Tom DeLonge, the Blink-182 guitarist turned UFO researcher, reached out to John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. And in one email that was dated January 25th, 2016, the subject line reads, General McCaslin. And here's what DeLonge apparently wrote. He mentioned he's a skeptic. He's not. I've been working with him for 4 months. I just got done giving him a 4-hour presentation on the entire project a few weeks ago. Trust me, the advice has already been happening on how to do all this. He just has to say that out loud, and he is very, very aware as he was in charge of all the stuff. When Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General McCaslin was in charge of that exact laboratory up to a couple years ago. He not only knows what I'm trying to achieve, he helped assemble my advisory team. He's a very important man. And McCaslin's wife confirmed the connection. Part of that post reads, it is true that Neil had a brief association with the UFO community through Tom DeLonge, former frontman for Blink-182 and founder of the organization To the Stars. Neil worked with Tom for a bit shortly after his Air Force retirement as an unpaid, Neil's choice, consultant on military and technical scientific matters to lend verisimilitude to Tom's fiction book and media activities. Neil does not have any special knowledge about the ET bodies and debris from the Roswell crash stored at Wright-Pat. Though at this point, with absolutely no sign of him, maybe the best hypothesis is that aliens beamed him up to the mothership. However, no sightings of a mothership hovering above the Sandia Mountains have been reported. Now, obviously, she's being sarcastic there towards the end. She's pointing something out here. But Billy, I guess I have a couple of questions here. A, and I hate to say this, would she know? Would she know? Would a husband share this information with her? B, would she tell the truth to the public about this? Or C, if she really is, she didn't even have to be that specific, but she did. So maybe she does have this information, is trying to dispel it in some way in order, like you say, for people to focus on what they need to with respect to this investigation. So let's start there. I mean, you see what I'm trying to say?
Which, even though we have top secret clearances in the government, your spouses still understand sort of what's going on without being told. You know this. When you come home, your wife sort of knows what's going on. They can sort of read into you. I believe she sort of knows. Did she know the exact details of things? Maybe not, but they always sort of know. So yes, I think they sort of know about what goes on in their person's life, their spouse's life. I don't know if the time that's passed between when he did this and his life now still connects him to the point where he's the most experienced at the subject in which we're dealing with here.
Right.
I think there's other people that they could have went to if they wanted to exploit information from that could have a better effect than this gentleman.
So two thoughts about that. One, maybe he's in a more vulnerable position, and that was maybe why. But also, I'm trying to process this and see if it makes sense. How do investigators actually thoroughly look into all this? Would the sheriff's office have, the ability to go snooping around Wright Air Force Base, Wright-Patterson? I don't think so. You have the feds involved, FBI. This almost feels like a movie in a way where you're trying to find something bigger. Aren't they going to be limited in learning more about what he was researching, what his career was like? It's not like he worked as an accountant. So
you'll have the FBI working with military, federal investigators, CID, NCIS. And what's going to happen is that there's going to be certain things that the FBI is going to have to stop at where the military, federal law enforcement is going to pick up from. So they together will meet somewhere in the middle and share as much as they can. As you know, a clearance is a need-to-know basis. And there's some things that I'm sure he was involved in that no one has the clearance to understand. But there has to be an investigation. Local law enforcement is not going to be able to. They can give you the basics. Hey, the home looked like there was no, signs of struggle. The basic investigation in a neighborhood where they're gathering cameras and trying to view witnesses. But when it gets to the top secret spaceship in a garage somewhere, they're not going to get to that point. That stuff's going to be handed off to the FBI. Then the FBI is going to work it from there, moving into military law enforcement.
I just want to ask you this final point, since I interviewed him on my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live. This one comes from investigative journalist Ross Coulthard, who works with News Nation as well. He has kind of been sounding the alarm on this case in a big way. I mean, on his podcast, and again, he mentioned this on my show, but his podcast, Reality Check with Ross Coulthard, he called McCaslin's disappearance, and I'm quoting here, a grave national security crisis. And he said, if you were Russia or you were China, God forbid, General Neil McCaslin would be one of your targets. So I sincerely hope that's not the case. So Billy, real quick, what do you make of that one? It's very similar to what we're talking about, but Ross is very well respected in the field. Your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. And there is a need for concern. The man knew a lot, he dealt with a lot, and he still knows a lot. So, that's the reason I think you're seeing the FBI and the military in this search for two reasons. Number one, it's because of who he is and the information he had available to him. Number one. Number two, you're seeing it out of respect for his position. I think that's the reason you're seeing the military out there helping to search for him. Out of respect, this man was a general, that he spent so many years in the military. Just like a police officer go missing, you would see the same thing. But there again, you're also seeing them do the search, do the investigation. And sometimes one sort of covers up for the other. So you're not really understanding which one are you seeing. Are you seeing it out of respect, or is this a federal investigation that they're trying to keep covered up and using we're out here searching for him out of respect to cover up the fact of the investigation?
I want to get one more theory. I lied. One more thing. This one's a little different. It's not really a theory about why he disappeared, but about a possible where. So we did a deep dive through Facebook. We came across a comment from March 2nd, and a woman responding to one of the wife's updates who says she might have seen him. Here's what she wrote, and I'm reading this directly from her comment. I reported that I had seen someone fitting this description on Friday at about 11 a.m. at the Whitewash Trailhead, Piedra Lisa Canyon, and gave the physical location of the parking area. The man I saw was near the bridge over the arroyo, just at the beginning the trail from the parking area. He was off to the side, not on the trail, maybe 20 feet from me. I thought something seemed a bit off with the man, like not fully engaged, but I didn't speak to him. Now, she posted this on March 2nd. She said she already reported it to BCSO. But again, here we are weeks later. The sheriff's office still has no confirmed sightings. What do we make of this?
It's important. It needs to be investigated. We get a lot of sightings when we have missing people, but I'll tell you, a lot of those sightings are not the people. We've had people swear to us that this person was 2 feet in front of them and they knew exactly it was them and it really was not them. And we encourage people to give information like this because it's a possible lead. But there again, it's a possible lead. It's not the end all be all. Go out there, investigate it, try to see if that really was him and base that on what he was wearing at the time and what he left wearing at the time. Did he change clothes? People really don't do that. So yes, get out there, make sure it's right, make sure it's him. If it's not him, keep moving on, keep those feet on the ground, start searching.
Billy, thank you so much for taking the time. Before I let you go, tell everybody a little bit more about your organization and the work that you do, because I think you've given a sample of how much of an expert you are in this and how valuable it is, the work that you do. So if you can tell everybody a little bit more.
Absolutely. We run a nonprofit called We Are the Essentials for the Missing. You can visit wearetheessentials.com. You can learn about our mission. We go out and we work as private investigators, former law enforcement officers, military service members, free for families of missing people. Our job is to get boots on the ground. We search, we locate, we rescue, and we recover. No matter what, we do our best to live on purpose through Christ to help bring the missing home for families, to give them answers so they can have peace.
Billy Lane, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you always having us on.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also follow us on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody. Could singer David now be hit with federal charges? I wonder because of the alleged child sexual abuse material apparently found on his devices. This alleged illegal sexual relationship over state lines. Are the feds getting involved? Are they already? Because if that is the case, David's legal predicament would change drastically. I am bringing on a former federal prosecutor to discuss. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So before we go any further, if you're into content creation, if you're putting things out on social media, have you ever wondered how we're able to share all of these clips from all of these stories so quickly? Here's a secret. We use something called Opus Clip. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it so easy to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform. Through AI, Opus Clip generates B-roll, it reframes footage, and it even cleans up audio. It is so easy. Just visit opus.pro/sidebar. You sign up, you upload, and in minutes you have perfectly edited clips ready to go. For TikTok, Shorts, Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop. And having a tool like Opus Clip means that our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. This is the most powerful tool there is to share ideas and edit like a pro. So go to opus.pro/sidebar to get a free week and then 50% off. Could David face federal charges? Now remember, he's currently charged with California state crimes. 21-year-old David Anthony Burke has been charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains, all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who was found dead, mutilated in a Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard out in Los Angeles, and that this car was apparently registered to David. And the criminal complaint also includes special circumstance allegations of murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, lying in wait. There was a special allegation that Burke allegedly used a deadly and dangerous weapon, a sharp instrument, to commit the crime. And the reason that's all important is because if he's convicted, he could get a higher penalty. He could get life in prison without the possibility of parole. He can even get the death penalty, even though there's a moratorium on executions out in California. But essentially the argument is that he allegedly killed Celeste on April 23rd, 2025, after she threatened to expose him. Prosecutors allege he couldn't let anyone know about their alleged illegal sexual relationship, that this would ruin his career. So they claim he lured her to his property, killed her shortly after she arrived, stabbed her to death, and then dismembered her body. He has entered a not guilty plea. It's important to always remember that he is innocent until proven guilty. But with all that said, now I am wondering about federal charges. Could federal charges be on the horizon? Because if that is the case, that will change everything. For that, I want to bring in Gene Rossi, former federal prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, to talk about this. Gene, thank you so much for taking the time. Always good to see you. I have to just start with the big one. This is the one, when this came out, this was my first thought. And I haven't had an opportunity to really dissect it as much as I wanted to, because from the evidence list included in a filing ahead of the preliminary hearing, which is set for the end of the month, and that's where prosecutors will present what they say is sufficient evidence for this case to move forward, there's this part. It says, quote, "The description of photographs depicting the victim naked, as well as while she was engaged with defendant in sexual activity when she was 13. As this evidence constitutes child sexual abuse material, CSAM, the photographs themselves will not be presented. While all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, the CSAM is proof of their ongoing sexual relationship while the victim was 13 and 14 years old." And Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman said in court in a recent hearing that the search warrants in this case turned up, quote, "a significant amount of child pornography on Burke's devices." Now, I go to you, Gene. If that is the case, is that automatically federal charges?
It's not automatically, but it sure points towards federal involvement. And there are two federal charges that could occur here. And I'll get to a third in a moment. But I want to go to the child pornography. They have seized 8 terabytes of information from his iCloud account. They've only reviewed 1 terabyte. So they got 7 more terabytes to go where they could even enhance the murder charge and also child pornography. But go to feds. The U.S. Attorney or the Department of Justice could charge him, theoretically, with possession of child porn and or production of child porn. Possession is a 5-year minimum. The production is, I think, a 15-year minimum. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's 10 to 15 years. But it's a minimum. The other charge that could possibly occur here is federally, is kidnapping. It appears that she may have been lured to his apartment across state lines, and that for the purpose of kidnapping her, not letting her go, and then he abused her and he killed her. Kidnapping resulting in death is at federal level.
Would it still be federal? Would it still be federal if she came from Lake Elsinore, California, to the Hollywood Hills in California?
No, but we don't know if she went to another state and he was communicating with her. We don't know. We got 8 terabytes of information. We have 7 more terabytes to go. We don't know that. But on the child pornography stuff, that's definitely an interest of the federal prosecutors. I can tell you that right now.
Let's explore that a little bit. I looked at some of the statutes and tell me what the elements are and how it might apply. So I saw 18 U.S.C. 2251, sexual exploitation of children, production of child pornography. 18 U.S.C. 2252, certain activities relating to material involving the sexual exploitation of minors, so possession, distribution, and receipt of child pornography. 2252A, certain activities relating to material constituting or containing child pornography. And I looked under the DOJ's website. They basically say images of child pornography are not protected under First Amendment rights and are illegal contraband under federal law. Section 2256 defines child pornography as any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct involving a minor, someone under 18 years of age. Visual depictions include photographs, videos, digital or computer-generated images distinguishable from an actual minor, and images created, adapted, or modified but appear to depict an identifiable actual minor. Federal jurisdiction is impacted if the child pornography offense occurred in interstate or foreign commerce. So this includes, for example, using the U.S. mails or common carriers to transport child pornography across state or international borders. Additionally, federal jurisdiction almost always applies when the internet is used to commit a child pornography violation. Even if the child pornography image itself did not travel across state or international borders, Federal law may be implicated if the material, such as the computer used to download the image or the CD-ROM used to store the image, originated or previously traveled in interstate or foreign commerce. And then it goes, any violation of federal child pornography law is a serious crime. Convicted offenders face severe statutory penalties. For example, a first-time offender convicted of producing child pornography faces statutory minimum of 15 years to 30 years maximum in prison. A first-time offender convicted of transporting child pornography faces, like you said, fines and a statutory minimum of 5 years to 20 years in prison. Convicted offenders may face harsher penalties if the offender has prior convictions. Okay, I guess I go back to you when I'm laying that out. Is it just the fact you put it on your device and it connects to the iCloud? Is that sufficient? I mean, I think a lot of these statutes were built before our technology. And so it's not like the classic example, child pornography, you put in a mail, you send it to somebody, right? If it's on your phone and it's in the iCloud, is that enough?
That could be enough. Because here's why, because the interstate nexus for child pornography cases, and actually any federal crime, the bar is very low in terms of affecting interstate commerce. If you use your iCloud, if you use a computer, if you use the mails, it's almost inevitable you're going to invoke a federal jurisdiction via the commerce, affecting commerce. So that doesn't bother me one bit in terms of the affecting interstate commerce. I did want to add this. The intent here would be circumstantial. You probably don't have any admissions from Mr. Burke. I'm going to call him Mr. Burke. So you really, just his possession would satisfy the elements of either intentional, knowingly, and or willfully possessing this material, or transporting it or producing. It sounds like he took it up a notch and he was producing this child porn. He just wasn't receiving it. He seemed to be obsessed with her. I would say this, one of the articles that I read said it's possible that he was starting his relationship, if you will, I use that loosely, with Miss Hernandez when she was age 12. So we got 12, 13, that's well below 14, of course. So he's facing some charges at the state level that are pretty significant. But I want to go back to the feds. If there is any indication that she crossed state lines, that would invoke the kidnapping statute if he lured her across state lines, which is possible. I don't know. And they have this death resulting clause of the kidnapping statute. That is death penalty eligible at the federal level. And I'll guarantee you this. If the LA U.S. Attorney's Office has evidence of kidnapping resulting in death, you can guarantee they're going to charge it, and they probably would seek the death penalty. Because from what I've read, this gets to a case I had in the Eastern District of Virginia, United States versus Ernesto Cole. He was a drug dealer. He killed about 35 people. One of the people whom he killed was in the Eastern District of Virginia. The victim was put in a car that was parked on Teddy Roosevelt Island during the 4th of July, 1991. And tourists and people saw flies, and the odor from the car over 3 days was just overwhelming. They impounded the car, and they found inside the victim. That was the basis of the murder charge, the drug trafficking murder charge. This has similar qualities. It seems like that she was left in the trunk of that car for weeks.
Yeah.
While it was parked in front of his rental property in Hollywood, I think.
Yeah, and that's what complicates it. But again, I haven't seen anything that like the car was driven across state lines. It might have been transported within California, but I haven't seen it crossing state lines, which actually, talking about crossing state lines, it brings me to something else. I'm curious your perspective on another potential federal charge. Sex trafficking. What do I mean? So in the brief, it says numerous text messages between defendant and the victim evidencing their sexual relationship, pregnancy, abortion, and use of Plan B emergency contraception. Messages through March 2025 prove defendant continued to manipulate the victim as she messaged, "All we do is have sex and just hang out. Man, I want more than that for myself." These messages were obtained from defendant's iCloud data. And by the way, apparently there was a prior investigation into their alleged relationship. And it said, despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. Defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. Gene, whenever I hear about an alleged illegal sexual relationship with a minor, and this is going across state lines and international lines, is that sex trafficking?
Yes. Go to the Diddy trial in the Southern District of New York. He had a RICO count, he had a Mann count, and he had sex trafficking involving violence. I don't think you have RICO here, but you could have a Mann Act. Mann Act is, I'm in Washington, D.C. I call a lady of the night in L.A. Hey, I'll pay your airfare and hotel. Come here and we'll have physical relationship. That's a Mann Act violation. There's no threats. There's no violence. If you add violence, that's sex trafficking involving violence or the threat of violence. We could have that. Now, here's the thing. This is why I think kidnapping could be on the radar screen, in addition to Mann Act or sex trafficking at the federal level. I'm sure she left the state of California, and there were communications between Mr. Burke and Ms. Hernandez that caused her to come back to L.A. and engage in a relationship with him when she was under 14, or even if she wasn't under 14. Right. Sex trafficking doesn't have an age. Mann Act doesn't have an age. So those are two federal charges that could apply.
Does he have to promise her something? Does he have to give her something of value? Does he have to give her money? Is it paying for the trips? Because isn't that a key component of a sex trafficking case? I don't know if it's different if you're talking about minors.
The jury instructions for the Mann Act and the sex trafficking is very broad. It could be entice. Entice could be you're just the verbal persuasion. It could be a financial gain. It's very broad how you entice somebody to cross state lines for either Mann Act purposes or sex trafficking purposes.
Okay. By the way, before I go into the next component of this and how this may work, I just want to go back to the potential CSAM, the child sexual abuse material. What's a defense? And look, this is the prosecution's narrative about what they found. It's the prosecution's description of what these potential images are. Do you say, as a defense attorney, it's not that? These are very benign images. They're not what is being described. Or if he's in possession of it, it's on his devices, case closed.
The thing about child pornography, if I have a magazine on my desk right now and it's child pornography and I know it's on my desk and it crossed state lines, I got it in the mail, I'm guilty of possession of child pornography. That's all you need. It's really an easy charge to prove. The only defense two defenses. One, you didn't know you had possession. If you had possession, it was a mistake. That would be one defense. The other defense is, it's not really child porn. It's a photo of a young girl in a nice dress or in the playground. It's not child pornography. That would be the other defense. That second defense, the other defense, that doesn't go anywhere. I'm sure what's on his iCloud or anything short of the iCloud is pretty graphic. And I think Justice Stewart said, pornography, I know it when I see it. Same thing applies to child pornography. I know it when I see it. So it's not hard to prove that that's child pornography.
I want to touch upon something else. So Beth Silverman, again, the assistant DA who's prosecuting this case, said that discovery materials in this case would include the results of a wiretap. Okay, and also searches of Burke's cell phone and iCloud accounts, and that law enforcement executed 54 search warrants. Wiretap. Does that mean the feds are involved?
Possibly, yes. Now, at the state level, they can get wiretaps, but at the federal level, wiretaps are very common. Well, they're common in this type of case. So it could be a federal wiretap. It could be a state wiretap. It could be both. Here's the other thing I was interested in. There were grand jury subpoenas served on the parents of Mr. Burke in Texas, okay, yes. Houston, Texas. They were served on the parents in April of 2025, And as you mentioned before, her alleged murder occurred around April 23 of 2025. And the motive would be, one, she could possibly be pregnant, and or he's worried that he's a target of an investigation. What I'd like to know is, were they just state grand jury subpoenas, or had the feds gotten involved and also served grand jury subpoenas on the parents? The reason I mention that is, if the parents got grand jury subpoenas from the feds and they were doing something to conceal, alter, or impede the investigation, that's an obstruction of justice charge.
Okay, that actually leads into something else. I thought about this. I don't know if there's anything here. There is a federal law in the books against tampering with or killing a witness. I was part of a federal proceeding, right? Now, as far as we know, there was no federal proceeding. However, if we go by the prosecution's narrative that she was allegedly going to expose him about their relationship, and even though, again, there's been nothing to indicate there was a federal proceeding or a federal investigation, but if she said, I'm going to show everybody these pictures, or I'm going to the FBI, if there are like messages about that, could theoretically this be a case of allegedly tampering with, killing a witness at the federal level? I might be stretching this because I don't know all the situation, but I thought about it.
Well, at the federal level, you need an investigation. You need a pending proceeding. And I supervised indirectly a charge where a witness in a federal investigation was going to cooperate with the feds or had been cooperating, and she was brutally murdered by MS-13 members. So that was a separate charge
That's terrible.
involving witness tampering. But it would be an aggravating factor for first-degree murder in the special circumstances that she was a potential witness, and he took her life, allegedly took her life. I will say this, though. Unless the wiretaps have some admissions or inculpatory statements, Mr. Burke has an argument that I'm assuming there's no forensic DNA on the body. That would be bad, of course. But they have an argument. I don't say it's successful, that, it's too attenuated. You can't place him at the scene of any crime. There's no admission that he took her life. If that's the case, then they have an argument.
Well, I'll counter that by saying,
go ahead.
they through digital evidence. Okay, this is what they're saying they have. I don't know. We'll have to see what they have. But they claim through digital evidence and cell phone evidence and surveillance evidence, they can track her movements to this property. They can track purchases that he made to allegedly, dispose of her body. They can track his movements to Santa Barbara. Also through, messages that he allegedly sent. They've created a timeline of when this alleged murder happened. And there is some forensic material, too, that I think is of note. But I just want to take a step back here. What would be the advantage of pursuing a federal case simultaneously with a state case? Is it that if there's a weakness in the state case, hey, we can go the federal route? Does it complicate it at all? Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, the advantage is the defendant's facing two wars, if you will, Eastern Front, Western Front. So that's always puts a burden on the defense. And it's a lot easier to convict somebody when you have two battles going on. The negative is, if you have two charges in two separate forums, state and federal, you're going to have problems with production and disclosing of exculpatory evidence, other things that you have to disclose, because you're going to have the state and federals compare how much information they each have. And a judge is going to say, hey, state, you get everything you can from the feds and vice versa. That could complicate things. Usually what happens is the state defers to the feds, but I think the horse has, we had to conduct it here every Saturday. The horse has left the gate, if you will, on the state charge. They've already started the process. Usually at the beginning of an investigation, the state and feds decide who goes first or who's going to take over the case.
So in other words, if there were federal charges, it doesn't necessarily mean the federal case would go first. There's a possibility the state case could go first.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Now, I don't recall any mention of the feds at all. What do I mean by that? In the press conference from LA authorities, the LA District Attorney's Office, law enforcement, haven't heard anything about the feds. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening, right? I mean, Could the LADA's office just not be saying anything? Are the feds investigating behind the scenes? I don't know. You tell me.
Jesse, think about it. You're Nate Hochman and you're having a press conference. You're announcing these first-degree murder charges and other charges involving lewd acts and sexual exploitation. The last thing you want to do is have a press conference and say, okay, we've charged Gene Rossi, but the feds are doing something too. You're directing the media to go to some other forum to ask questions. You want the focus to be on your investigation alone. So it doesn't surprise me that they were very reluctant intentionally to avoid mentioning that the feds may have an investigation. I would be shocked if the the U.S. Attorney's Office does not have an investigation or will be starting one. I would be shocked if they are not doing anything.
And again, maybe someone in the comments could correct me, but I go back to that press conference. I don't recall the LADA saying, this was a joint operation between the LADA's office, the LAPD, Riverside County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, because sometimes you see that, right? They'll be like, we had a multi-agency effort. The FBI helped us with information. Sometimes the FBI is part of a state case, right? So the fact that they didn't mention that, you tell me.
Well, that they did not mention the feds at all, FBI, ATF, anybody else, does not surprise me one bit. They want to have the focus on the LADA's office and their office alone. Not that they want to hog the media, but they want to focus on their case. If there was a joint investigation, they would have mentioned that. But I want to stress, it does not mean the feds are just sitting on their hands and not looking at this at all. I guarantee you they are looking at it. Whether they charge is another matter, but they are looking at it.
Gene Rossi, my gosh, gave us a lot to think about. Thank you so much, sir. Always good to see you. First person we wanted to have to talk about this. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.
All right, guys, thank you very much for coming today. I have called you for a very special thing. We have an event day after tomorrow, and Khushi, you will make the necessary arrangements. Khushi.
Yeah, sure, sir.
You seem a bit off today.
Everything is good, sir. Don't worry, I will do.
All right, I am counting on you. All the very best.
ਕੱਲ ਰਾਤੀ ਰੋਈਆਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਏ ਤੂੰ ਵੀ ਰੋਇਆ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਚ ਲੜਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਤੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਚ ਅੜੇ ਤੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਨਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਖਰੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਦਿਖਾਵੇਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਨਾ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਕਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਾਨ ਨਿਕਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੈਂ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਬੋਲਾਂ तेरा नाम बुलाते आवे ना 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 ਪੁੱਛਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੱਚ ਸੱਚ ਦੱਸੀ ਵੇ ਇੱਕ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਗੱਲ ਵੇ ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖੀ ਵੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਵੇ ਤੇਰਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਵੇ ਸੁਣ ਮੇਰੀ ਸੁਣ ਲੈ ਯਾਰ ਵੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਏ ਹੈ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਲੜਦਾ ਏ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਸੜਦਾ ਏ ਰਾਜ ਤੂੰ ਹਰ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੋਏ ਰਾਜ ਤੂੰ ਹਰ ਵਾਰੀ ਲਾਵੇਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਨਾ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਕਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਾਨ ਨਿਕਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੈਂ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਬੋਲਾਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਬੁਲਾਤੇ ਆਵੇ तू यारां दे नाल बहना है तेरी दूरी ते मजबूरी दिल मेरा ए सहंदा है किथे जावां ना जावां हर एक गल मैं पुछदी आ मैनू कदे मनाउंदा नहीं तू मैं किन्ना रुसदी आ मैनू चंगा लगदा है मैनू चंगा लगदा है भावें सिर मेरा तू खावे इन्ना ना सताया कर मैनू मेरी जान निकल ना जावे मैं जद भी कुछ बोला तेरा नाम बुलाते आवे
हे गाइस, तो अभी आपने हमारा दुनिया सॉन्ग देखा, सो प्लीज कमेंट करके बताना कि आपको सॉन्ग कैसा लगा।
एंड हाँ, वीडियो को लाइक करना, जाने से पहले रिपल म्यूजिक स्टूडियोज के चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर लेना। थैंक यू, बाय बाय एवरीवन।